very honored. I think Harriman's honored to have such a distinguished panel of people who have been very involved on the question of which we're going to explore today about genocide denial and the effect that genocide denial has on post-genocidal societies. My name is Tanya Domi, and I teach here at Harriman in Balkan Studies. And it is indeed my honor to introduce our guests today. We are joined by Professor Menachem Rosensaft from the Columbia Law School, who is a very strong advocate on this issue and has been actively engaged in Bosnia and Herzegovina on the Srebrenica genocide. He's going to speak to his own experience about working on this issue. I'm delighted to also introduce Alice Ndertu, who's the Undersecretary General and the Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide at the United Nations. And thirdly, I'm delighted to introduce my former colleague and friend, Dunya Miratovic, who's the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights. She's zooming in with us today. And lastly, my dear friend and colleague, Velma Sadic, who's the founder and president of the Post-Conflict Research Center based in Sarajevo, and she's also the founder of the Western Balkans Coalition for Genocide and Mass Atrocity Prevention. So each of our speakers are going to make opening remarks, and then I will follow up with a question for them, and then we'll open it up to all of you for questions with our speakers. And when you raise your hand to ask a question, I ask that you identify yourself and say, are you a Harriman student, or you're a GSAS, or are you a SEPA student? Just want to know what you're doing, and especially my class, my students in my class. I look forward to this. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Professor Rosensaft, and he's going to make his opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Domi. And I'm most grateful to you for inviting me to today's discussion. And I'm honored to be here together with Undersecretary Ndertu, my friend Commissioner Dunya Mijatovic, and Velma Saric. So we're dealing with an important topic, and let's do a very quick couple of minutes recap. On July 11th, 1995, insurrectionist ultranationalist Bosnian Serb Chetnik, the term used to describe Serbian nationalist partisans during World War II, took control of the Srebrenica enclave from a Dutch United Nations peacekeeping force and proceeded to murder in cold blood approximately 8,000 Bosnian Muslim men and boys, in what in short order was recognized as a genocide. These same Chetnik also perpetrated a host of crimes against humanity across Bosnia between 1992 and 1995 in pursuit of their goal of cleansing the ethnic Serb part of Bosnia of non-Serb, that is predominantly Bosniak, but also Croat inhabitants. All this is not opinion on my part. It is fact as determined by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, as well as the International Court of Justice. The Srebrenica slaughter has also been recognized as a genocide by numerous governments across the globe, including the US, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and the Netherlands, among others. These facts, these realities, as it were, must be the starting point for our discussion and deliberations today. At Professor Domi's request, I prepared a presentation addressing the serious issue of genocide denial as it pertains to Srebrenica. But in light of developments over the past several days, to be precise, since this past Saturday, I feel compelled to change the focus of my work here today and my emphasis in the discussion. On Saturday, October 7th, the terrorist Hamas organization launched thousands of rockets into southern Israel and sent several thousand of its members from Gaza into Israel, where they murdered and kidnapped Israeli civilians, including women, children, and the elderly. There are credible reports that women and girls were raped and sexually abused. Hamas's often proclaimed goal is to eradicate the state of Israel, reclaim all the territory between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River for Palestinians, that is, Palestinian Arab, and to cleanse that territory of Jews. Again, this is not opinion on my part. It is fact taken from Hamas's charter and the statement of its leaders. Here are only two. Hamas official Halil al-Khaya in November of 2010, and I quote, "Palestine is Islamic and not an Islamic emirate from the river to the sea that unite the Palestinians. Jews have no right in it, with the exception of those who lived on the land of Palestine before World War I. Another, by God, we will not leave one Jew in Palestine. We will fight them with all the strength we have. This is our land, not the Jews." My point, and I say this as someone who has been an active and outspoken supporter of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process for more than 35 years, is that the Hamas terrorists of today are precisely the same as Mladic and Karachechniks of 1995. They are committing the same type of war crime and crimes against humanity. And their intent is to perpetrate a genocide against Jewish Israelis. That is a somber reality we must confront. I am appalled when I see presumably intelligent students at Harvard, Columbia, and other universities and colleges express their support for Hamas and seek to place the blame on Israel for the crimes Hamas has committed. I'm appalled when a few members of Congress express support for Hamas, and I am appalled when reporters in the news and on television refer to Hamas terrorists as militants, thereby sanitizing not just the rhetoric, but the killer. This is important for our conversation today because we are presently witnessing exactly the same type of pseudo-intellectual sophistry and ostrich head in the sand denial that has characterized Srebrenica genocide denial for the past 28 years. I won't take up much more of our time, just a few more minutes, but let's be very clear. What Milorad Dodik and others in Republika Srpska are doing on an ongoing basis is to deny that the genocide took place, to shift the burden to the victims and making them responsible for the crime that they committed, and to engage in a kind of equating. Oh, they're all equal. The Serbs did this, the Bosniaks did that. None of that is valid. For our purposes, a genocide needs to be recognized for what it is, period, paragraph. And we can discuss this a little bit further. I strongly support Dunya Mijatovic's initiative, together with an organization called the Mothers of Srebrenica, to have July 11th declared as an official Srebrenica Genocide Remembrance Day by the United Nations General Assembly, in the hope that it will become a part of the international consciousness, much as has been done with the Holocaust on January 27th as International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and has been done for Rwanda in April. And for that, I will turn over back the floor to you.
Thank you, sir. Under Secretary General, you get the mic. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me, for having invited me. I'm here with my colleague Dalila, and thank you for being on this.
Who's from Bosnia?
Yes, who is actually from Bosnia and Herzegovina. So these things that we are describing here are not things that are so removed even from the office. I would like to start off by first appreciating this very distinguished panel, but also all of you for your time to come and have this very necessary discussion because this year, 2023, marks the 75th anniversary of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. And it was the first human rights treaty to be adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1948. And this came only 2 years after the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 96 of 11 December 1946, which was titled The Crime of Genocide, that affirmed that genocide was a crime under international law. And the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide provided for the very first time a legal definition of the crime of genocide. So this Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crimes of Genocide that turns 75 this year was a commitment to never again allow horrors such as had happened in the Holocaust to happen again. Not just in the Holocaust, but it was a culmination of a discussion in terms of, as we know, the person who gave us the name genocide, Raphael Lemkin, he really contemplated various other instances in the history of the world in which communities, groups of people had been targeted on the basis of their identity, on the basis of just the fact that they were born into that identity. They didn't have to have done anything. And so the Holocaust was the latest to be discussed. And the decision was that now we are going to say never again, and we will never have anything like this again. We'll have a convention in place. Of course, we know that that did not happen, and that again and again we have had genocide and also killings that target people on the basis of their identity. We know for a fact the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda and the Bosniak Muslims in Srebrenica, for example, that it was not possible for this convention to stop these genocides. And we also know that still today that there are communities around the world at risk. And as of this morning, I've issued 2 statements about 2 such communities. Yesterday, there was another statement, like they keep going out because you keep raising the risk. So as a special advisor on the prevention of genocide, so my mandate is to monitor and raise alarm over situations across the world where there's a risk of genocide and related crimes, by which I mean war crimes and crimes against humanity. I'm also mandated to raise awareness on the causes and dynamics of these crimes and to strengthen the capacity of member states, regional organizations, and civil society to prevent them. And I must emphasize that my mandate is on prevention and that I do not have the mandate to make determinations if a particular situation amounts to genocide or related crimes. That only a court of law can do. So my mandate is prevention, not adjudication, which is a mandate of the courts of law. I don't have quasi-judicial powers or judicial powers. So my role is to raise alarm when I see the risk factors or early warning signs of genocide and to advocate for preventative action to be taken, or for situations where genocide or related crimes may be ongoing, to advocate for halting such crimes and accountability for perpetrators. So my office is also the UN system focal point on hate speech, coordinating implementation of the UN strategy and plan of action on hate speech, which was launched by the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, in 2019. And the strategy responds to growing concerns over increased use and dissemination of hate speech, especially online. The strategy enhances UN efforts to address the root causes and impact of hate speech through various tools, including education, dialogue, and promoting counter-narratives to stand up against hate, working with a wide range of actors. We know that hate speech in its most serious forms of incitement to discrimination, hostility or violence, or incitement to violence, to genocide, is both an indicator of risk and an early warning sign of genocide. And we also know that hate speech, together with discriminatory and dehumanizing policies and practices, lays foundations for the societies in which genocides can happen. If you study the history of the Holocaust, if you study the history of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, study the history of the genocide against the Bosniak Muslims in Bosnia and Herzegovina, you will note a pattern, a very clear pattern, that right before, not right before, like before the genocide, that there was hate speech during the genocide, there was hate speech after the genocide, there was hate speech, of which we call in its most serious form denial of the Holocaust, denial of the genocide of having happened. So we've seen it also in situations where serious violations that may amount to genocide have taken place. So for example, the Rohingya in Myanmar and the Yazidi in Iraq, to mention just a few. And we've also seen that hate speech now is further amplified by the use of technology and social media. So we use a framework of analysis methodology, and it's available on our website. We encourage as many people as possible to use it, that identifies the common risk factors for these crimes. And besides hate speech and incitement, one of the key risk factors we look at is societies that have a history of genocide or related crimes for which there is an absence of accountability, active denial or revisionist history, absence of reconciliation or transitional justice processes, and linked to all this distrust between communities. So now that brings me squarely to the topic of today's discussion on Holocaust and genocide denial. It's a topic that's very close to my mandate. It's a topic I pay very close attention to, and that I have made a priority since I took up this role. I emphasize always that Nazism apologists have been very adept at providing a template for denialism, not just for the genocide, that was the Holocaust, but also for other genocides around the world. So we've seen the denial or distorting the facts of the Holocaust and the genocides against the Tutsi in Rwanda and in Srebrenica, Bosnia-Herzegovina. And we see it as an affront to international law and justice and to the dignity of the victims and survivors whose loved ones were killed simply because of who they were, because of their identity, and whose loved ones continue to be killed just because of who they are and because of their identity. And it's extremely important to connect the history and the now to understand that so long as the definition of what genocide is so important for us to understand the current going-ons that are happening in the world today. When genocide is defined as the intent to destroy in whole or in part an ethnic, racial, religious, national community, then you think about it in terms of that it's a statement that goes before 1948 and after 1948 when it was created. So we do know that despite international court processes such as the Nuremberg trials, the International Criminal Tribunal in the former Yugoslavia, the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, having proved repeatedly, conclusively, in exhaustive legal processes that these crimes happened, that revisionists and genocide deniers continue to ignore judicial decisions. And part of that informs what Professor Rosencraft has just mentioned, the current thinking. So likewise, glorification of perpetrators of genocide is an obstacle for accountability and reconciliation, and it is often closely intertwined with hate speech and contributes to fuel it. Glorification of perpetrators emboldens and raises the risk of potential commission of such crimes in the future. So the impact of denialism and revisionism is not only painful for victims and survivors, but also a direct barrier to reconciliation. The Commission of Genocide has generational impact. Addressing this crime requires accountability, reparations for victims, as well as reconciliation and healing in society at large. However, reconciliation and healing can only be possible when there is an acknowledgement that these crimes have happened and when societies are willing to learn from such pasts. So we've seen the impact of genocide denial firsthand in Bosnia-Herzegovina, in the wider Balkans region, as well as in Rwanda. And I've seen it firsthand. And I've been most struck by the devastating impact that this has on the survivors and victims. Imagine that those who already had to fight for accountability to occur in the first place, those who recounted the horrors of what happened to them or what they witnessed through their testimonies to courts, are now forced again to educate about the past, about why they were targeted, and counter the narrative presented by the deniers. And in Bosnia-Herzegovina, I've had the pleasure to see the important work that is being done by organizations such as Velma's organization, the Srebrenica Memorial Center, the Mothers of Srebrenica, and many others to bring awareness and to tackle denialism and hate. So we've seen time and time again Holocaust denial resurging. Sometimes we don't recognize it because we see it as a different history. Most of the times people talk about the Holocaust and the genocides that happened in the past as history. They don't see that they continue to live with us in the present. And we have all these alarming reports over the last several years that we've kept issuing about how such sentiments remain prevalent and that are often closely linked to discrimination and hate. I would like to remind, because people keep forgetting, that the COVID-19 pandemic proved a stark reminder of conspiracy theories linked to anti-Semitism that remain prevalent. Sometimes we forget. So, and it was with this in mind that my office last year, in partnership with the Jacob Blonstain Institute, we published a policy guidance on combating Holocaust and genocide denial, protecting survivors, preserving memory, and promoting prevention, in which we pointed out that the denial of Holocaust and genocide is a warning sign of societal fragility and of the potential for violence, including genocide. So this policy guidance is available on our website. We brought in several experts to help in drafting it. And it acknowledges the importance that efforts to tackle these threats are based on and fully complies with international human rights standards, in particular, freedom of opinion and expression. That's a question that's often asked of the work on hate speech that we do, and we always say that it conforms with freedom of opinion and expression. Legislation should be used only for the most serious instances where genocide and Holocaust denial reaches the threshold of incitement to violence. But tackling Holocaust and genocide denial needs to go beyond legislative measures. It requires employing a wide range of policy measures, including the use of dialogue, education, and awareness raising. It requires a greater understanding of the extent to which Holocaust and genocide denial is being spread, both offline and online. Who are the actors spreading such narratives? Who are the main targets? And also requires designing counter narratives accordingly. It requires political, religious, and other leadership at highest level to speak out against such narratives and to stand in solidarity with victims of genocide and related atrocity crimes. So as I come to the end, we do know that tackling Holocaust and genocide denial also includes putting in place education systems that convey comprehensive and accurate information about the past and about genocides in other countries. And in many countries, in Europe, for example, denial of genocide is a crime. Next week, I will be in Nuremberg. We've planned this for the last 2 years. We are going to discuss with legal experts genocide denial, Holocaust denial, which is real, multifaceted, and itself the preparation of another genocide, and what it is that we can do from all these perspectives. I also want to mention that we launched a policy guidance on countering and addressing online hate speech, a guide for policymakers and practitioners, in partnership with the Human Rights Big Data and Technology Project at the University of Essex. And it builds up on 3 years of dialogue by my office with tech and social media companies, Chatham House rules in a room like this, closed door, and with civil society on current challenges and opportunities in tackling online hate speech, including Holocaust and genocide denial. We've worked with tech and social media for the last 3 years in terms of dealing with algorithms, putting together training content for content moderators. But ultimately, we do know that that is not enough. So let me conclude by saying that we do know that this requires all of us to be engaged, but I would like to inspire you as the Columbia community. I would like to inspire you in terms of, because I've put out all these issues of how difficult the world is right now. We do know as we speak right now that there are people who've been getting killed and who are in very situations of risk. And I want to inspire you with a story of Raphael Lemkin, who was the person who gave us, as I said earlier, he coined the name genocide and the convention. As well, he was very, very effective in pushing for the convention to be ratified, the first ever convention to be ratified. So we need to invest in the objectives and purpose of this convention and ensure that it's universally ratified. As we speak right now, we have 153 countries that have ratified this convention, the latest of which was Zambia, the Republic of Zambia, last year, because we need to swiftly hold perpetrators accountable. So the theme of this year's 75th commemoration is a living force in world society, the legacy of the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. So a living force is what Raphael Lemkin aspired for this convention to become. And he wanted it to be alive in our lives, for us to carry the horror that he had witnessed, because we do know that he lost 49 members of his family in the Holocaust. And so he inspired this theme. And in his 1944 book, Exit Rule in Occupied Europe, which is important to read, he coined the term genocide. He fled his home following the Nazi invasion in 1939, lost 49 members of his family in the Holocaust, and he spent most of his life deeply committed to rectify the fact that there was a name for the killing of one person, murder, but none to describe the killing of 1 million people who've been killed on the basis of their identity. And he questioned his mother as a small child when she read to him about how the Christians were being fed to the lions, and he was asking his mother, but why didn't anyone call the police? And when he was 21 years old, he asked his professor, but why, professor, do we have this name murder for the killing of one person, but not for the killing of people who've been killed as a group? And you know, he was inspired by the story of this young man whose name was Solomon Travayan, I can't pronounce it right, whose family had been killed. He was Armenian, and he looked for the captain of that had led the killing of his family, and he shot that captain, and he told him, this is for my mother, this is for my family. And then Solomon was tried for the killing of this captain. And so it became a case that everybody was talking about, because Solomon's argument in court was, why are you trying me? Why didn't you try them for killing my family? And so the argument, of course, was that they killed them as a group because it was an act of war. So we do know that Raphael Lemkin then combined the prefix geno from the Greek word for race or tribe with the suffix cide, so genocide, which is derived from the Latin word for killing. And that Lemkin played a very key role in the campaign that resulted in the recognition and finally the codification of genocide as an international crime in the 1948 Convention, and that he expressed that hope, as I said, that it would become a living force in world society. So at 75 years, we are taking stock of the positive achievements of the Genocide Convention and its legacy. We are inviting an examination of what more can be done for the convention to have the impact intended, to ensure that genocide never happens again. It's a question that humankind should never stop asking. And I welcome all of you, the community of Columbia, to be part of this conversation. We have a series of build-up events unpacking the convention, bringing together experts. We are discussing prevention, we are discussing punishment in terms of unpacking the convention and the prevention and punishment of the crime of genocide. We've launched a campaign on social media that will run until the 9th December, the International Day of Commemoration and Dignity of the Victims of the Crime of Genocide and Prevention of this crime, which will mark the day of the adoption of the convention. So I'm inviting you to join this campaign in the spirit of Raphael Lemkin, and look forward to joining forces with all of you in this global effort. And I can tell you, there's not a single day that I do not walk to work that I do not think of that man, Raphael Lemkin. Walking on the street on 42nd Avenue, if you read the description of the books of people who've written about him, that he was very poor, that he had I think only one change of clothing, and sometimes he would pass out on the UN corridors because of hunger, and how he would walk on the streets, and how he would stop anybody he thought had any influence and tell them, we need first to have a resolution on genocide. We need to create a convention on the prevention of genocide. And then how, with all these efforts, he finally triumphed. And unfortunately, after his efforts came through, then he was admitted to hospital and he died. And when he was in hospital, he was saying, like, I'm just fatigued for fighting for the prevention of genocide. So that's the inspiration I leave with you here today, because sometimes we may feel that you as one person, there's not much you can do, but we can all do something in the wake of the things that are going on in this world today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Raphael Limkin is buried in Queens, and I think about him being over there, looking over us. That's a really wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't know all that personal information about him. Although when you take international law at Columbia, you will learn about him, even if you're a CEPA student. So now I would like us to move to Dunya. And Dunya is in Strasbourg, where she is the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights. I have said to her most recently, my God, it could not be a more challenging time. A significant, massive war in Ukraine, the rumblings in the Balkans. Once again, Dunya, you're in the middle of it. So over to you.
Thank you, Tanya. It's a real honor to join all of you, even though it is from cyberspace. But at the same time, I feel also very honored to speak after Alice and Menahem, because they, as you heard already, have a special sort of way of talking about the issue that we are discussing today. And I think your headline, Corrosive Effect, is really the right way to describe what denial does for societies. I will make just a brief personal remark, which in a way is very much connected with my work at the Council of Europe. I became commissioner in 2018. And of course, I realized that the mandate is broad and it has all human rights issues. I realized that I have 20 people to cover 47 at that time member states in order to tackle all human rights. And then I also started looking at the priorities. And in this process, I realized that the work that has been done on transitional justice at the Council of Europe is quite significant. But in this process, not one single time, mothers of Srebrenica came to talk to member states or to present, what happened to them. And for me, this was quite a extraordinary, if not, embarrassing news for the main human rights body in Europe not to pay any attention to the genocide that happened in Europe in the 90s. And apart from that, I then decided, at least during my mandate, I'm going to try to change this. It was not easy, and it's still difficult because it is about my country and my people and the place I was born and raised. So it makes it even more problematic in order not to be seen as me pushing for something that is just my interest. But I think what happened in Srebrenica should be of the interest of all in Europe and beyond. If we want to live in peace, if we want to start talking about genuine reconciliation. And what Alice just said, she said, I'm working on prevention, and the courts, they should be, making judgments. And in this particular case, we have judgments that a genocide was committed in Srebrenica. I already said on many occasions, it's not a matter of opinion. It is a historical fact, legally established by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the International Court of Justice, and domestic courts. And still, we have this continuous corrosive denial that is happening in Bosnia and Herzegovina, neighboring countries, and beyond. It is used as a tool to manipulate. It is used as a tool to inject more hatred. It is used as a tool to offend victims and their memorialization process. So it is in a way engraved now after 30 years in all pores of the society that is suffering. And in my humble view, it will continue suffering as long as we continue having this kind of public discourse that is actually led by the main politicians in the region and also some countries outside the Council of Europe area. So no matter, which kind of genocide we are talking about, I think it should concern us all. It undermines justice that was so painstakingly obtained for the victims, and we know how long it took. And this should also particularly now be taken seriously when you have neo-Nazi and nationalistic populist parties breeding again in Europe, almost unchallenged. And this is a reality that we are witnessing. And what I think is also important to mention that the denial and relativization of atrocities, but also historical revisionism continue to be condoned and actively pursued by nationalistic politicians at the highest political level. This is particularly strong in Serbia, in Croatia, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, particularly in Republika Srpska and in Kosovo, where the authorities have so far led a one-sided approach to dealing with the past. And it's not, challenged at all. It is continuing. It's almost a mainstream information and discussion. Right-wing extreme nationalistic groups are also key drivers of the culture of denial and glorification, as well as of violence, and are a serious risk factor in the region, and also undermine any kind of efforts to prevent a recurrence of conflict. I recently published a report after my official visit to Serbia, where transitional justice, particularly issues related to genocide denial, war glorification, were mentioned as a part of this report that, in my view, is extremely important. But somehow, there is no interest to look into this. Media was quite interested, but politicians, they didn't pay any attention because there are no consequences for them. They just continue denial because they can get away with it. And as long as we have this kind of situation in the Balkans, this is going to continue. Outright denial of the Holocaust still exists in Europe. And this is something that we are also working quite a lot on. And this denial has many facets and also includes minimization, trivialization, or distortion of the Holocaust. But I would like to emphasize that the Strasbourg court has taken a robust approach to Holocaust denial. I think there we are very clear. On a number of occasions, it has excluded Holocaust denial from the protection of Article 10 using the abuse of rights clause under Article 17. And when I visited Auschwitz-Birkenau on the occasion of the Roma Holocaust Memorial Day, I stressed at that time that the State Museum not only reminds us of our duty to remember, it makes us also feel the imperative to act on that memory and help the current and future generations to stem off the prejudices and hatred that made the Holocaust possible and caused so much suffering to our fellow human beings. So that is why I think the education and working on hate speech issues is so important. Education also of all of us on what actually is genocide. What I would like to recommend to all of you is Twitter account of Alice that at the very beginning has a very good explanation, and it talks in a very I would say, it's very, easy to understand language. What is the difference between genocide, between, all these issues that we are constantly hearing from many, that are saying, oh, it was not a genocide, it was a crime against humanity, it was a war crime. So there, what Alice is doing, she's breaking down the difference, which is something that I think is extremely important for the scholars, for all of us dealing with human rights, and for the journalists that are writing about this. Because sometimes, it is even, that people are talking about this in good faith, but at the same time, they do not have enough information on how to properly address those issues. And it is important to do this, particularly when we are teaching about the remembrance and memorialization, and making it possible, to clearly call the things the right way, because this is also an issue of science, humanity, and also important for the future of all of us. So my wish would be to have, genocide denial, Holocaust denial, integral part of the curriculum at secondary level, with teachers given specific training in the Western Balkan region. And educational programs should emphasize the link between current manifestations of hatred and intolerance in order to start moving forward. Having a date of remembrance by the United Nations would, of course, have a very particular message to the world. This, yes, we do remember, and yes, we do care. And this is particularly important because of denial that is, constantly present even after the rulings by international and domestic courts. But that, again, is a matter of certain moves, and I'm glad, in this endeavor, people from Bosnia and Herzegovina that do care, and from the region of Western Balkan, have friends like Menahem and Alice, and young people as Velma and her team and many others working on these issues that should not be forgotten, and this all in the name of humanity and well-being of all human beings.
Thank you so much, Tanya. It's really very important insights. I will add, I have been personally frustrated about the media coverage of the Ukraine war, in that they talk about it as being the single most significant war since World War II, thereby erasing everything that happened during the 1990s in Bosnia, and also throughout the region, Croatia, and as well in Kosovo. So this has been very frustrating, and it also speaks to the fact that most of the editors at newspapers were, probably weren't even, they were probably children 30 years ago, and most of the editors have retired, and there's very few reporters that have had the experience of covering the Balkan Wars. One of the main exceptions is Christian Amanpour, who has been actually interviewing. She just recently interviewed Alexander Vučić, and she also interviewed President Osmani of Kosovo. So she's on top of it, but she has very few peers in this regard. So now I would like to turn over to Velma Sadic, who is a tour de force. She is a force of nature. This woman works every single day in the goal of creating a culture of peace and tolerance in Bosnia and in the broader Western Balkans region. So it's my pleasure to turn it over to you. Velma and Eileen's going to help us with your slides.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Thank you, Undersecretary General, Professor Dunya, and all of you for coming today. As Tanya mentioned, I'm coming from Post-Conflict Research Center. I can proudly say that it's a leading non-governmental organization in the field of peacebuilding education and research center in Bosnia. We have been internationally recognized for our innovative approaches to peace-building education, transitional justice, violence prevention, and post-conflict reconciliation. PCRC was founded in 2011 with a vision to contribute development of society where people no longer perceive ethnicity as a source of their differences, but instead they see as a basis for prosperity, redirecting the focus toward economic development, improving the educational system, creating sustainable democracy, and creating a lasting culture of peace. So I do have a few slides because I wanted to bring, I had a wish to bring some of our work and share it with you, because majority of work we also do in the field of peace building education is participatory art and multimedia. So some photos behind, they actually been part of Srebrenica genocide commemoration. I mentioned that we have been established in 2011, and actually the first project we did in Bosnia, in Sarajevo, was project with United Nations Office of Special Advisor for genocide prevention and responsibility to protect. On 2011, we brought the first group of civil society organization and victims organization to learn about the mechanisms of genocide prevention and mass atrocities. We did 5 regional seminars, 2 years, and then in 2017, we saw opportunity to build the capacity of our annual genocide prevention seminars and establish the Western Balkan Coalition for Genocide and Mass Atrocity Crimes, as Tanya mentioned. The main idea of coalition was to connect and facilitate collaboration about participating civil society organization, but also to develop and carrying the programs that identified, assess, respond, and prevent atrocity in their communities. The Western Balkan Coalition for Genocide and Mass Atrocity Crimes is a regional, inclusive, civil society-led initiative. It does consist of 20 leading civil society organizations. I'm going to mention that in the report of a United Nations Secretary from June 2019, he highlighted our work by saying civil society is an important factor in prevention of atrocity crimes. The establishment of Western Balkan Coalition for Genocide and Mass Atrocity Prevention contributes to promoting, coordinating reconciliation efforts and the grassroots level, and plays a crucial role in prevention of conflict and the risk of future atrocity crimes. That is how we continue collaboration. Maybe you saw some photos of Undersecretary General coming to a couple of events and commemorations we did at the Srebrenica Genocide Memorial. In the last 4 years, we do have a memorandum of understanding working with the Srebrenica Genocide Memorial closely. Majority of work we do is we commemorate every July 11th. We bring different artistic and educational components to memorial. There is a Srebrenica summer school. There is Maria, my student, who is actually a Columbia student, but she was a part of our Srebrenica summer youth school. We had 4 generations. It's a 7 days long program being Tanya T. Yes, Tanya is a professor at school, but we are bringing regional students, 50 young people from the region of Western Balkans, and also international students to teach from the first-hand experience, spending time in memorial, spending time in Srebrenica, talking to experts through a set of multimedia and masterclass workshops, talking to survivors, mothers, etc. So, yeah, I'm going to mention that this work is not easy. There is a serious attack happening recently on non-governmental and civil society sector through a couple of laws being issued in Republika Srpska, one related to media. Now the new one is coming. It will be related to the public register of non-governmental organizations who work in this field, marking them as a foreign what is the word, foreign spies or
Yeah,
exactly agents.
yeah.
This pressure goes through through the different levels. So it's not easy, especially if you connecting your work quite closely with the genocide prevention and you work in Srebrenica and you work in memorial, you can expect to be constantly attacked. On another hand, Post-Conflict Research Center was also a proud organizer of the peaceful protests for Ukraine in March last year. And there is like so many different initiatives we work on, but the most the most important one is initiative with Mothers of Srebrenica. They're under Secretary General and Tanya and Dunya and many other women were like contributing in our nomadic monument, the Scars of Srebrenica, also our Srebrenica Heroines Conference, which we held last year, and we are continuing our fight with the Mothers of Srebrenica by hopefully building a museum for these heroines. I stop here. We see the trailer, if it's possible, of our new documentary coming. It's like 2 minutes long, and
Okay,
I said
there's
so
a
many things.
documentary.
I think Ala will help us. Yeah. Can you do it, Maria? Just
Okay.
link on actual link or
Sorry.
someone. Yeah,
Sorry, okay.
on
thank
the
you, guys.
links. Yeah.
Here comes Eileen.
He knows how to do it.
Can you-
Ova salvage thereof, yet gilt noe, Maja gilt noe, Andra salvage netal, Andra salvage rifet, Andra salvage reshal, Andra salvage aria, Andra salvage rifad, Strina salvage vasya, Nina salvage hilda. Nezmočno перемішана сама сумка не було звішка. Це смачно, я можу відповідати по одразу призовцях. Тож я скажу, працював, а ставить.
Cemetery in Potachari where everyone that was murdered is buried. Just getting, doing it back. Before, I'm going to ask each of the speakers a question, since I'm the moderator, I have that privilege. And then I will ask Menachem wants to say a few words. I do want to say a few words about what's going on in Israel as well. I am absolutely shocked and devastated by the reported crimes. These are atrocity crimes. These are crimes that are targeting Jews. The shocking reports by the president of the Anti-Defamation League on MSNBC the last 2 mornings have been very difficult to hear. Mass rapes, mass machine gunning down 240 teenagers. Teenage girls were raped next to the dead bodies of their friends. And we're talking also about the beheading of babies. This is gruesome and beyond any scale that I've heard of since Bosnia. But every time one approaches another genocide, you think it can't get worse, but it does. The violence is so attenuated and escalated. And it's as someone who's been teaching human rights for almost 20 years, I am now to the point where I think there is no one more deadly than man himself. And so this is a very difficult time personally for a lot of people in the city, in New York City. There's probably some Jewish students in this room. And I happen to be Jewish as well. So this is a very, very difficult time. But it's also an appropriate time that we are having this discussion. So Menachem, when you talked about Hamas, I think you're absolutely accurate about how the media, particularly American media, has been reporting on these crimes in Israel using the term militant, just is not accurate. And also there's been a lot of inaccurate reporting about Gaza, because there are no settlements in Gaza. And it's very troubling to see this happening. And at one point, media outlets in America did cover Israel a lot more than it does now. And I think it shows the lack of education of reporters. They just don't know what they're reporting on. What do you think can be done about that? And in terms of the ongoing conflict, what are your concerns right now?
Well, on the bad news, worse news level, it's really not good news, bad news. The reporting in the US is actually a lot better than it is in other parts of the world. I am getting reports from friends of mine that it took the BBC approximately 1 day to start focusing on the atrocities supposedly committed in retaliation against Hamas, and almost forgetting about what caused the present event. So to that extent, the US media is probably better than most. Having said that, we are still living in conditions where, and unfortunately, the universities lend themselves to it, of creating false equivalences and creating comparisons and trying to be fair and to equalize the blame.
Yeah.
And of course, and by the way, this gets, and we've been living with it with respect to Israel for quite a while. Let's go back for a bit. And this gets us also to the concept that Undersecretary General Niderito raised with respect to reconciliation. Reconciliation, and I'll come back to the answer, but this is critical. Reconciliation is only possible when the perpetrators or the representative of the perpetrators recognize and acknowledge their acts and then are willing to engage in a dialogue based on that. This is what happened in Germany. This is which makes it quite easy to have discussion in Germany because we are, for the most part, talking off the same script. Everyone acknowledges what happened, and then you can move forward. When you are dealing with Hamas, and by the way, and what happened, for example, around 1988, in conditions that I was actually involved in, is that the PLO under Arafat, which had strenuously for years refused to recognize Israel and committed itself to the destruction of Israel, changed its approach and was willing to accept Israel as a state in the region, and then recognize Israel, and then engage in negotiation. And it's not that Arafat suddenly became Mother Teresa, but you had a partner, and with both Arafat and now Abbas, you have someone with whom one can have a discussion. There is a recognition that the other side has rights. When you get to the situation with Hamas or Islamic Jihad or Hezbollah or Iran for that matter, there is no such discussion. When it is a zero-sum game and the determination is to destroy, and whether it is genocide or crimes against humanity becomes a matter of nuance, we don't have that. So what has to happen with respect to media coverage and with what has to happen on the university level is an understanding, an acknowledgement that we are not talking here about equal. What Hamas did and what Hamas is doing, as Professor Domi correctly encapsulated, is a crime. It is a crime against humanity. It is if it is not yet a genocide, it is certainly genocidal intent. And there is no way of making those perpetrators anything but international criminals. And one cannot say, yes, but. There is no but. The retaliation that Israel is going through cannot be depicted as somehow a criminal act, because what Israel is doing right now is trying to prevent another Saturday from happening next week, next month, next year. It can only be done by eliminating the ability of Hamas to function. And Hamas, and a former colleague of mine here knows this very well, Hamas has a long history of using human shields, of placing its nerve centers in hospitals and schools, and then when they are targeted, playing the role of the innocent victim. And much of the media, in part because of ignorance, in part because they are being fed propaganda, buy into it. And our role is to make sure in the first instance that the facts are out there. And we simply, and Jonathan Greenblatt of the ADL has been very good on that. Ted Deutsch of the American Jewish Committee, whom I listened to on MSNBC this morning, has been excellent on the topic. It is important to just point out what is happening. And it is important to have anybody, whether it is at Harvard, at Columbia, at CUNY, anybody who starts defending Hamas, saying, you are telling us that you are defending mass rape. You are telling us that you are defending the killing of women and children. You are telling us that you consider taking hostages and then threatening to execute them summarily to be legitimate. If that's the case, you have placed yourself on the wrong side of the historical debate.
Thank you very much. Undersecretary, you have the whole globe to worry about. What keeps you up at night? What are you concerned about right now? I have been tracking, the crimes in Ethiopia over some time, and I just wonder about a lot of places just don't get any public scrutiny. There's no reporting on what's going on in different countries, in remote areas. What keeps you up at night when you're working your mandate?
I would say that much of what keeps me up awake at night is that in many of the places where this kind of identity-based conflict is happening, which is what I focus on, that I know people in those places. So it's not remote. People call me and tell me we are going to be attacked. And it's the question, that's what brought me to the UN, seeking a solution for people who say we are going to be attacked, but we don't know who to tell.
Mm-hmm.
It continues to be a dilemma even today. One of the statements I've issued this morning is actually on Ethiopia.
Oh, really?
Yes.
It's notable, isn't it, for mass rape? Like there's a lot of mass rape in Ethiopia.
Yes. Killing,
Very
mass
destructive.
rape,
Yes,
torture, you name it.
Yes.
Everything is happening in Ethiopia right now.
atrocity crimes.
Atrocity. And we, like when writing that particular statement was difficult because of the references of we've been for 3 years, so the statement itself that we issued today says we began raising this 3 years ago, and on this statement and this statement and this statement, so many statements with the dates. And the other thing that keeps me awake at night, it's connected with we don't know who to tell, is that the UN, when the creation of this office, when it was created, then part of the discussion then became, okay, it's good enough to have somebody who will provide early warning, because that's what I do. But what about responding? Who needs to respond? So then the member states discussed. The UN is organization that gets to decisions through consensus. So even the creation of this office happened in 2014, long after the genocide in Rwanda had happened in 1994 against the Tutsi and against the Bosnian Muslims in 1995. So all these years of discussion back and forth until they go to a consensus. Then they continued on another consensus that, and in 2004, not 2014, in 2007, then they agreed on the concept of responsibility to protect, which essentially was about, okay, so what then do we do once this is put ahead of us? But then the discussion on the responsibility to protect has 3 pillars. And the first pillar is that the member state itself has the responsibility of protecting its populations. And then the second is that if the member state is not able to protect its populations, then other member states can come in to help. And then the third one is a military option. Now, the Security Council has to approve that military option. We have vetoes in the Security Council. It's very difficult to get to that point where this is agreed. So which then means that we are in a world where we have to keep thinking of what do we need to do to protect people who are at risk of genocide. over and above what the UN itself can do, what else can be done? And that's the other thing that keeps me awake at night. I'm thinking about what can we do. When I worked previously as a mediator of armed conflict, without the option of having the UN's wind in my sails, we used to work with communities and map the community, who are the people in the community, who are the perpetrators, who are the victims, and then establish who has control over what element of the attacks that are about to happen or that are happening to a certain community, and then work with a particular group to do their little bit. So if the elders in the community can sit down and have a meeting with the key, like with the armed groups, then so be it. But we used to find small ways of ensuring that this didn't happen. And I do believe that as a world, we are there again, where we have to ask ourselves, in the wake of the things that are happening right now, what can be done to protect people? What can be done to support states to protect their people? And how do we ensure that the victim is the person that we have right in front of us? So thinking about, of course, what's going on in Israel on Sunday, what began in Israel on Sunday, what's happening in Gaza now. I think part of what kept me awake last night was when I saw the letters from the Harvard students, and I say to myself, how can their analysis be so off? I mean, they are in Harvard. Like, you need to unpack, like, you know, when you are working on a conflict situation, the basic rule, Velma will tell you, is to get to the root cause of the conflict. And getting to the root cause of the conflict is where they got it wrong. Because for me, it's very clear to me that the root cause of what's going on today is anti-Semitism. That for the Jewish community to endure 2,000 years of pogroms and of killings and of, you know, all the things that happened to them, that you look at all the people who live in the US today from so many nations around the world, and you see people who don't feel the need to go somewhere where they will feel safe, because that's what the Jewish community tries to do in Israel. They are looking for a space where they can feel safe from all these problems that keep targeting them. And for us not to speak to that, it just shows maybe a huge failure in the way we teach and understand history, but also a huge, I would say almost success with Holocaust deniers, that they've been able to step into this space and get people to forget so quickly. I spoke about the COVID pandemic. We're speaking about the pandemic now, and all those anti-Semitism that we saw, and anti-Asian tropes that we saw. We're speaking about it now. So really, those are
Very fair.
Yes.
Those are very fair comments. Thank you so much. Dunya, what's your biggest challenge right now? I mean, you just issued this very significant report on Serbia, and what's so interesting about your report is that you point out why this regime continues to be a destabilizing factor in the Balkans, yet EU and US foreign policy seems to not get it. So what, in your role as the Human Rights Commissioner, I hope you sent your report to the State Department and to Brussels, because they need to read it. Beyond Serbia and an obvious active war happening in Ukraine, what is your biggest challenge right now?
Well, I think you mentioned, several challenges. I think, it would be really unfair to say there is only one challenge, but it's really devastating what we are experiencing now, not just in Europe, but it's beyond that, and you see that somehow, my feeling is that we didn't learn on mistakes, and it's just, you know, this vicious circle that we are, you know, moving in and really continuously witnessing suffering constantly. So you mentioned the report on Serbia. Of course, we do send all the reports to all interested parties, and sometimes, you know, we get questions, not sometimes, you know, always immediately, but a bit later on. I also did a report last year on Kosovo, which had exactly the same topics, including issue related to conflict-related sexual violence that you tackled in your report, your recent report, Tanya, which I think, you know, is also of extreme importance for all of us working on those issues. But Ukraine is a huge challenge. It will remain so. I visited Ukraine several times. At the beginning, I was there in beginning of May 2022. I went to Bucha, Borodyanka, and Irpin, of course, Kiev, immediately after Russian forces pulled out, where I could talk to people that actually experienced horrifying. You know, they told me stories that I thought I will never hear after the war in my country, about rape, about killings and extra judicial executions. And I talked to authorities, which I think is really important part of my work. But what actually makes a difference is talking to people. I went, you know, door by door to different families who wanted to talk to me, most of them did, in order to ask them what really happened there. And that makes my reports, you know, more accurate, listening to people that are going through difficult times. Sometimes, you know, we underestimate the role of listening, the role of all of us trying to make the world a better place. So I think, you know, talking to people, engaging with the society in question is crucial. And in the process of, you know, talking to all, this for me is the most important part. I'm just now getting ready to go to Armenia, and immediately after that I go to Azerbaijan. And I will go to Karabakh region. It will be actually after 30 years. There was no presence there. There was a UN mission last week that went for the first time ever. But human rights are not really a topic of that trip. So we will be there for a week, and we will try, you know, to have some kind of reflections in this very difficult time when we have exodus of more than 100,000 people that are actually, you know, refugees in Armenia now. So, you know, there is no one single day where we do not have to tackle certain issues. And on top of this, you have issue that is very high on my agenda, and it's related to women's rights in Europe and beyond, because I think there we are also failing tremendously. After, you know, huge success and everything we achieved, we have issues related to women's rights, domestic violence, access to sexual and reproductive health and rights. And all these, you know, won battles are now under big question. So, yeah, there are many, many challenges, but in the center of all those challenges is only, you know, one thing that actually gives me energy and power, which is a human being. And people that are looking for, you know, protection and for help in all those countries that are going through extremely difficult time. So yeah, it has been, you know, for me, an extraordinary journey. It still is, but there are also some plans that are very much related to your topic. I will be publishing a report on the transitional justice developments in former Yugoslavia. So it's including Croatia as well. It will be published beginning of next year. It is a follow-up of the paper that my predecessor, Thomas Hammerberg, did in 2012. So I thought the time is right to see where do we stand on issues related to war crimes, missing persons, genocide denial, glorification of war criminals, and all those issues that are unfortunately still happening after almost 30 years after the war. So this is maybe, you know, something that is going to be quite interesting, not just for the State Department and for, you know, Commission, but for everybody to see, you know, the current state of affairs when it comes to human rights compliance and violations.
That's going to be very important. I will look forward to reading it. I also want to give you a compliment. Your advocacy on behalf of LGBTQ people has been admirable. And I know that you've even called governments to urge them to protect someone who's been beaten up. I personally know of that. And you've been a really strong voice and advocate. So I thank you for that work, Dunya. So Vilma, I think what's so striking about Vilma's work, and I know about it quite intimately because I am president of the advisory council of Post-Conflict Research Center. The work that she does, I think, with students and young people is so important. And the reason I say this is because, and my students will learn this as the semester gets going for us, is that, you know, a number of schools are ethnically divided, and there is no history book that recounts what happened during the most recent wars. And we know that it took 40 years for Germany to write a history book of the war itself. So what you do is like you fill in gaps in these students' education through your peace education efforts. It's very inspiring, and I think what it does is you're passing on knowledge, and all knowledge is shared. That's how we learn. Talk about how important that is to PCRC and all the things that you do, but the education piece.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. Well, in a country with 186 ministries, like literally, with like 3 rotating presidents, with 10 cantons, 2 entities, a Brčko district has also a level and the state level. We don't have for example, a state ministry for education. There are these conflicting narratives Tanya mentioned, this pure phenomenon of segregation, which still exists in Bosnia. And according to OSCE, there is around 56 schools with this name, 2 schools under one roof, where kids are literally physically separated. They go into a physical building, but they are separated in educational curriculums. They don't even interact during the school breaks. With a huge level of nepotism and corruption, with the biggest youth unemployment rate, with a massive brain drain of young people leaving the country, it's extremely important to talk about peace. Well, what we did and what we mostly can do, because government doesn't allow us, these nationalistic politicians being on power, they don't allow us to go and teach in schools, not even like for 45 minutes. Actually, there is a new decision by government of Republika Srpska lately being published, proclaiming not allowing professors who from Republika Srpska and teachers who even do some projects non-formally with the colleagues from Federation, other part of entity, they need to get a special permission. So for example, I wrote this manual, I have a name, Holocaust and Peace. It's our 8 years long work we did with a group of professors and teachers from all around Bosnia, including Republika Srpska and Federation. It's a didactic manual. It's a practical guide for educators where we developed 15 different modules or lessons. We do use some lessons from Holocaust, looking into, for example, hate speech and propaganda, but we also did develop special modules or manuals related to memorialization. Bosnia also doesn't have a state law which will regulate the way how we will commemorate The only state memorial is Srebrenica genocide memorial, being also pushed by the special decision of high representatives. So what we do, let's go back to like non-formal education, and we been able to penetrate also into formal education with this manual. We are extremely proud last year, but up till now we were working in non-formal setting, bringing young people into safe space, mixing young people, like of course bringing them from all these like different ethnic and religious groups. Majority of work we were like, you know, doing and trying to kind of utilize young people were around the stories of moral courage and rescue behavior, featuring stories of brave Jews and Muslims and Croats from all sides who were crossing the ethnic boundaries during the war and helping and saving life of others. We developed this large multimedia educational program featuring photographic exhibition. Then we produced some documentaries related to moral courage and rescue behavior. Then we produced also special manual. At the end, we developed our multimedia platform, Balkan Discourse. There are majority of writers writing for our Balkan Discourse, and whoever wants to know more, it can Google. Majority of writers are young people, which we train and teach about basic techniques of journalism and photography. Then through process of mentorship, we send them back to their community and they submit their stories per year minimally, like they can write about whatever they like, whatever they think is important. Literally, practically like raising voices among young people, like the platform for young youth voices that they can like speak what they would like to speak about it. You saw a little bit of our multimedia. We're specialized in the curation of our own multimedia. We produce more than 15 different documentaries, some of them been for very important TVs like PBS documentary we produce, Women, War and Peace. I came to testify, 2 episodes. We also produce more than 15 traveling outdoor exhibitions. We never speak only about Balkan and Bosnia. Majority of our programs for youth consist stories from other parts for also ordinary heroes. They have stories from Cambodia, Rwanda, and Holocaust. We did work in the field of preventing sexual violence in conflict, helping the UN ambassador for refugees, Angelina Jolie, to do her first film about systematic rape and violence in Bosnia, in the land of blood and honey. Then we developed and we were helping the British government with this special initiative preventing sexual violence in conflict. Again, educating young people about sexual violence and rape. So what I want to say, Tanya, is that we are trying to be quite like innovative with approaches where we use a lot of multimedia, where we use a lot of social media, trying to reach young people through all these like networks and sources we can. And I'm holding this manual because I'm extremely proud of this manual and the work we did in the last 8 years with our German partner Forum ZFD and our US partner educators for Institute for Human Rights in Washington, DC. We have been able last January train more than 120 professors and teachers from the canton of Sarajevo in these 15 modules, and together with Pedagogical Institute of Canton of Sarajevo. After this training, this manual is official part of curriculum for the whole canton of Sarajevo, which means that for the first time in history, peace building education and our work will be incorporated and it will reach more than 400,000 students in the canton of Sarajevo. We work on this project with the Jewish community, and now we are talking with 2 other cantons. So our plan is in next 5-6 years to complete all these levels, all these cantons, all these like ministries, and hopefully, peace education will be official part of our curriculum. So long story short.
Incredible work. And quite an accomplishment to have it adopted by the Sarajevo canton. So it's actually 1:30. It's a little bit beyond 1:30. So we're actually over, unfortunately. But I do want to give. I do want to thank our speakers. I don't think we're going to have time. If we want to if you're able to stick around, maybe the students could ask you some questions. You wanted to say something, Menachem?
Well, just want to point one thing out. And I'm very glad that Undersecretary General Dorito has it on her website. We have gotten, and that may be the one, shall we say, flaw in Raphael Lemkin's contribution. We have come to view genocide as the crime of crimes, the most heinous crime. Well, let's understand that parallel to it, there's a category called crimes against humanity, which is just as heinous, just as vicious, and it's just a different categorization. And I think we have to be very, very sensitive to not minimizing crimes that do not, by their nature, fall into a category that has, shall we say, the title. Why am I saying that? Because I don't want to be in a situation where what is being done by Hamas is sort of trivialized or minimized because it has not yet been adjudicated as a genocide, any more than if we look at Srebrenica, which is the genocide in Bosnia. And the fact is that what happened in Foča, that what happened all over Bosnia at that time, that has not been recognized as a genocide, but has been deemed a crimes against humanity, is somehow less. And what I tell my students very often is, I have not yet heard of a single victim of or subject of the unwanted attention who has said, oh, you mean I'm being killed as a crime against humanity and not as a genocide? I feel so much better. So I just want us to put this into context, because what is happening in the world today, the atrocities are such that we have to be able to counter all of them and be able to identify those responsible, and to use a much overused cliched phrase, not let them get away with it.
Thank you so much. I want to thank our distinguished panel. This really, this is an incredible way to begin the semester. And I'm really grateful to you, Undersecretary, for being here today, because I know you're a busy woman doing really important work. And this is the second time Professor Rosensaft has been at Harriman, and Vilma has been here many times, and Dunya was honored by the Harriman Institute. I think it was in 2015. You gave the Harriman lecture, and so I'm very delighted to host all of you again, and I hope you will come back, Undersecretary. I would really appreciate you coming back to talk to our students and faculty. Thank you all so much, and I hope people can come away from hearing this, giving it some thinking about what you can do, not only in terms of your education, but maybe how you can join and help NGOs like Velma's to help them deal with the reality on the ground, where the situation can be quite precarious. So anyway, thank you all very much. Thank you, Dunya.
Hvala, Dunja. Pozdrav.
Hvala. Thank you.
And can someone just speak?
Bye to all. Ciao, Fala.
Ciao, ciao. Be careful.